Okay. Today we're actually looking at a different group of chimps, which is, the traditional chimp sort of society and the traditional chimp sort of environment that we usually find them in are usually forest dwellers. They tend to only, at max, possibly up to about 20 square kilometres. The group that we looked at last time, Bart, that was about 8. They'd actually extended out to about 12 square kilometres. So they tend to be quite constrained by their environment. They tend to focus on hunting in their traditional sort of way of going out in packs, grabbing smaller type of animals, taking them to a certain elevation, dropping them from a high elevation, and then just using gravity to kill them. So that's their traditional hunting technique, and that's why they've got that. They've got more upper body strength, which is what that other study that we looked at last time. This is a different group that we're actually looking at today, which sort of lives in an area that used to have, if we go back a number of years, decades, it was more of a forest type environment, or with a bit of bushland, but it wasn't as arid as it is today, due to the West African region being a sort of an area that's in the last couple of decades has had a lot of warfare. What's actually happened is a lot of people have been displaced, and as a consequence, a lot of vegetation has actually been removed from a number of these areas, which has actually changed the environments in those areas into a more arid, more savanna type environment, very similar to the sort of environment that early hominins would have basically been in or found themselves in due to climate change back then, where the majority now, while there are some that attribute it to climate change, there's been a lot of upheaval and warfare in that area, and a lot of people that have just been cutting down forests and stuff like that, and encroaching into those areas. So that is probably a bigger factor than any other sort of factor in it. So what we'll do is we'll actually look at this study, and I'll just share my screen. Okay, let me just increase the size of that. So basically, the lead author is Jill D. Prudes, and she's from the Department of Anthropology at Iowa State University. There's also some other people that are involved also. This Paco Batalani, and I believe he's from the Center of Human Evolutionary Studies, Department of Biological Anthropology, University of Cambridge in the UK. There's a couple of other people that she's actually also collaborated with, but for this study, and this study's back in 2007. The actual initial sort of contact with these chimps was back in 2001, but this study was done in 2005 and sort of published in 2007. So I'll just go through the summary. All through the tool use is known to occur in species ranging from naked mole rats to owls to chimpanzees are the most accomplished tool users. The modification and use of tools during hunting, however, is still considered to be a unique human trait amongst primates. And this is the difference between the primates, the chimps of other regions, and this region. This region, they're actually creating spears. So here we report the first account of habitual tool use during vertebrate hunting by non-humans. At the Fongoli site in Senegal, we observed 10 different chimpanzees use tools to hunt possum prey in 22 bouts. This included immature chimpanzees, so even the younger ones that go with it, and females, because basically in chimpanzee societies, very much like traditional human societies, they basically very mature chimps will go around, will basically stay with their mothers. And we've seen that in the previous one where they go on actually into the termite molds and literally use those little sticks to acquire a nice feast. Members of the age sex classes are not normally characterized by extensive hunting behavior. Chimpanzees made 26 different tools, and we were able to recover and analyze 12 of these tools. I will show videos later on and show some of the tools and all that. Tool construction entails up to 5 steps, including trimming the tool tip to a point. So that's a unique sort of innovation that we haven't really seen, other than, historically, if we go into the archaeological evidence, it's basically hominins. And even
Harry, I thought we were running at mammoths on all fours and diving at them with our open mouths. Are you telling me that's not what happened, Harry? Are you?
No, not at all. What's actually what these people are finding is that the chimps in a savanna environment are behaving very differently. They're basically, because for thermoregulation, they're actually using pools of water, which traditionally we've always thought that chimps are hydrophobic, that they hate water and they avoid it like the plague. But these guys are getting into the water and really enjoying themselves and cooling off. They're also going into caves, a very human type behavior when it's very hot to sort of really cool down and stuff like that. They're actually producing spears and hunting. And in particular, it's the women that are actually producing them. And there's a reason for that as well. Well, but the funny thing is, if you think about it, we've grown up with the notion that there are hunters and gatherers. The hunters are the men, the gatherers are the women, and women just gather. But in this environment, what are we seeing? In a savanna environment, similar to what early hominins would have actually encountered, we see something completely different behavior. We see occasionally, while they're not bipedal, occasionally they will walk upright and observe the environment to see whether any predators are around, particular cats and stuff like that. Behavior that we've considered that early hominins would have done, but we've never had really empirical proof. But this is the closest relative that hasn't even diverged evolutionary. But there are evolutionary pressures here in a different environment. And these chimps also now, this study talks about that they're actually sort of hunting within a range of 63 square kilometres. But the latest information actually that's been collected actually shows that they've actually spread out to as far as 110 square kilometres. That's a lot for chimps that usually don't extend it because they don't have because they're not bipedals, they don't have the physical strength in the legs. And I've shown that last time, remember when I showed that study, there it's all upper body strength, because primarily they used to hunt by grabbing a monkey, taking it as quickly as in an explosive speed as fast as possible to the top of a tree and dropping it to use gravity to kill it. Now these monkeys are not doing that. They're literally picking off different prey at the ground level, and they're also creating tools. The women have actually done the most innovation with the tool usage. And it doesn't surprise me because in a savanna environment, when you don't have forests and stuff like that, I mean, this is the thing that these guys haven't picked up. They don't know why. But I had a bit of a brain thought, a bit of my own hypothesis. And if you think about it, where are the majority of termite molds? They're usually in forest type environments. Why? Because there's a lot of trees, a lot of leaves around that these insects can use. When you go into a savanna environment, the amount of insect population drops. Women, on the other hand, don't hunt as a group, as a pack group, because that's not their tradition to do that. They usually take their young with them. They go to termite mouths and usually use small sticks to actually try and get their protein and fat out of there. But if you don't have enough, I mean, we've seen in other parts where they've actually had them in zoos and all that, and they have a lot of squabbling amongst chimps because they don't have access to termite molds, or they have few, and then they squabble who can actually get first picks. But if you're in an environment where you don't really have that, you have to really consider, well, I need food. And chimps tend to be a bit, especially the males, tend to be a bit selfish. They don't share as much. And for that reason, the women had to innovate. They developed they are the ones that actually developed the first spears, and they use the spears because they don't have the sort of the upper body strength or the energetics that the male chimp has. So they focus on.
And that would have been what necessitated those women to level their playing field somehow.
Precisely, to get access to meat, to get access to food, to high
and
quality
to protect themselves from men.
Precisely. So they've actually found, but actually in the savanna region, the funny thing is they are far more cooperative because they don't have the constraints. They don't even actually go into patrols. So they don't patrol their immediate area, even though there are other chimps around. This is un-chimp behavior. This is more hominin type behavior. And we don't even have bipedalism. We don't even have this movement. So it seems that the environment is actually pushing even behavior changes compared to other chimps in other areas, which is quite interesting, which is, so environment, I mean, I've always said environment is what actually molds that interaction between epigenetics and genetics, is what is actually eventually pushes creates these evolutionary pressures, which eventually change the morphology of these animals. The way they behave, the way they interact eventually changes who they are over time. Obviously, it took thousands and thousands of years for hominins to basically make those evolutionary changes. But we're actually seeing it now in chimps in a very short amount, a couple of decades, which is quite profound and quite strange and interesting that this is actually happening. It's based on, if you ask any anthropologist or any primatologist, they will tell you this shouldn't be happening. This is just weird behavior. Basically, they're out of their environment. They should be dying out, really, because they're being hunted by some of the local people as well. They should be really dying out, but they're actually thriving. They're actually innovating, creating tools, and finding a way to exploit that environment. Now, let me just bring this up. And I'll just go to this. We'll cover a couple of the videos. So I'll just get you to share that screen again. Thank you. Please tell me that the audio.
I've got audio. Yep.
Chimpanzees are among our closest relatives. We share between 95 and 98% of our genes. And now, researchers believe this trip on the Senegal savannah may give us unique new insight into our earliest ancestors. National Geographic emerging explorer Jill Priest has reported never-before-seen behavior here, including more than a dozen incidents where the chimps have made what appear to be weapons for hunting.
This is actually a spear that an adult female named Lucille, that we call Lucille, made to try and obtain a bush baby. So what she did was break off a live branch and then used it to jab into the hole where the bush baby was in an effort to get it, but she was unsuccessful.
Other chimps have been seen using their teeth to sharpen their sticks into a point.
The females are actually much better at this than the males. The males have been trying. They're trying to learn from the females how to do it, but they're not as successful in many cases. And that's primarily because they're still using their traditional pack sort of group type mentality of hunting rather than using a lot of the innovations. The women, because of the pressure of lack of sufficient food, they have created this innovation, but they didn't go into the gathering stuff, did they, Bart?
Not so much there.
No, they in a savanna environment, they all get into the hunting environment, and it sort of shows that because hominins, the cooperation between females and males, and this also empathy, the empathetic gene that's sort of slightly deficient, especially in the chimp males, over time in our species has actually, because of cooperation, has actually improved. And what we see in these chimps is far more empathy, far more peacefulness amongst themselves. They don't squabble. They don't try and steal, where you see far more stealing amongst chimps in other areas. Here, in this sort of environment, you see far more cooperation. So the savanna environment is changing even some traditional chimp behavior. And I just needed to point that out. We'll just continue with the rest.
It's been known that some chimps catch and kill other species and sometimes eat them. But until now, making tools for killing mammals had been considered a uniquely human behavior. These chimpanzees in Senegal are known as the Fongoli group. Priest believes they're particularly intriguing because they live on a savanna and spend most of their day on the ground like our ancestors did. Much of what we know about chimpanzees comes from troops that live primarily in trees, like those studied for decades by Jane Goodall and Gombe. But when our earliest ancestors evolved more than 5 million years ago, it wasn't in a rainforest, but in a dry landscape of grasslands, more similar to the Senegal savanna that's home to the Fongoli chimps.
I feel like this project is really important to our study of human evolution as well, early hominids, because we know now that apes can do this in this environment.
Priest has observed other interesting behaviors in the Fongoli chimps. They use plant stems as a foraging tool to fish for termites. That's something that's already been documented in other chimp groups. But she's also seen them using caves as shelter when it's hot outside. And then there's their regard for a local watering hole on a sweltering day. It's a scene that looks so familiar to humans.
Perhaps not without the huge hanging ball sack, though. I don't know. It depends where you come from.
That's true. Depends on the sort of animal you are. What turns you on.
Yeah. So, because they don't... Go on.
Use and the cave use, and any one of those I would have been happy with seeing any one of those. But to have that, to me, that's just a huge amount of information. I mean, that's great. I feel really lucky about that. So, and I just keep waiting for the chimps to do something else. Who knows?
Primatologists are careful not to project human motives or emotions on the animals they study. But Fongoli chimps may indeed exhibit some of our very earliest behaviors. And watching them may be like gazing into a mirror that reflects our very distant past.
And I'll just go to the other one, which is the sort of the use of water. So this is behavior we haven't seen anywhere else. When there are trees around, they'll still access those trees. And the tradition has been, but they're not only even deeper, like this second water hole is a much deeper sort of water hole. So, because the other one was more shallow, and I actually wanted to show that one as well, that larger one. Because if they were hydrophobic, they wouldn't be getting into that larger one, especially the potential for predators or all sorts of other animals in those sort of environments. But necessity sort of forces change in behavior. And when you're in an environment which is quite hot, which in the sort of dry season can vary from anywhere, I'll just stop that. Like in the dry season, it can vary anywhere from 40 degrees right up to 50 degrees, even 52 degrees, which is 125 Fahrenheit, which is quite bloody hot and quite humid in that environment. So it's understandable why this isn't normal forest type climate. So these pressures of the local environment are actually forcing this sort of behavior. Finished with that. Now, compared to also chimps in other parts of Africa, which primarily hunt smaller, at most they've been found to grab like little piglets, but a very small type piglets. These chimps, on the other hand, have a much more diverse type, food supply. We won't go through this whole video because it's quite a long video, but
I do, and we can the hunters themselves, and this is.
So these are the top 10 hunters, and 2 of them are actually women, a female, which do quite well. And in particular, I would check this out. That's a bushbuck. Now that's a much larger animal than traditionally chimps have hunted, so that's a bit interesting. Obviously, the galago, which is those little sort of creatures which they hunt with spears primarily, is, and excluding this male up here that is quite prolific hunter.
He's a specialist, though, isn't he?
Yeah, especially, some of them they will vary in their speciality and all that sort of stuff. This hunter is a more diverse hunter, but a very big hunter. I believe this hunter gets up to 45 kilos of meat hunted. So they're usually there. These people are usually there.
Come on, Harry. Chimps eat grass, don't they, or fruit or something?
Oh God,
Plants.
Yeah, I know. So these are observers usually go into these sort of areas for 1 or 2 months, and over that period of month, they've been hunting. That sort of quantity. That sort of quantity is sort of levels that that a lot of carnivorous populations have consumed in the past. So it's not actually small amounts, and the women, they could have basically gone into other things, but the focus has been on the hunt. It's on the meat. It's always on the meat, and that's the thing. A lot of they will try and play it off about the tool usage and the innovation and all that, and that's where the focus. And a lot of these researchers, you can see they're always trying to sort of minimize the interest of the meat, but all this behavior is focused on the meat. So it's disingenuous on their side, but we'll give them that, because we know that a lot of the actual primatologists around the world, especially nowadays, are sort of plant-based, and that's the problem. And they like to skew their data, and even she's plant-based. So, it's hard to, with these people, they can see it right in front of their faces, but they try to play it down.
45 kilos of meat in what sort of period of time?
Look, they're usually there for a couple of months in the sort of the dry season. So we're talking about
so that's a fair whack, isn't it?
We're talking about at most they may be in that region for 2, maybe at max 3 months, but they're not going to be any longer than that, because most of the researchers that I know of from other studies are usually only in an environment for about a month, because it's just too costly. Yeah. But if they don't actually specify how long they've been in that region. So if that's over a month, that's a lot of meat. That's more than even we consume.
Those individuals will be using that meat to win friends and influence people.
Exactly, and that's what they do. They do share amongst themselves. There's less thievery amongst them. And because they're more interdependent in a savanna environment for both protection, they sort of clam together, and they don't have a lot of chimps actually patrolling on their own, which they would in a forest environment. And the reason for this change in behavior is because you've got cats and stuff like that, and it's a much more riskier proposition. So it's better in numbers rather than actually, and this has changed their behavior. And it would be very similar to early hominins that went around scavenging and hunting and stuff like that. They would have been in small numbers, more closer together, working more cooperatively. So the environment is changing their behavior, and it would have done the same thing to early hominins, to us as well. So these are the sort of animals, and I'll actually show exactly what the animals are, because it's really important to see what these animals are. So we'll go for, I'll just put it up here so this makes it easier. Okay. So this is the one that primarily women hunt.
Oh, cute. Yes.
Yes.
Lovely.
It must bring tears to vegan eyes.
It must. But that's the epitome of save the animals, isn't it?
Yes. How awful these females are.
Yeah.
To go after such cute little things. This is, and I've actually made sure that I've researched them well. These are from the region, from Senegal, from this region. Yeah. They're not from any other region. So these are those other little vervet monkeys.
Yeah.
And that's basically that color there. Mm-hmm. And then we've got these are they call them. So these are the bamboo.
Now that guy is a ferocious opponent. You know, taking that guy on and predating on him. That's a big call.
Yeah, exactly. That's a baboon, and these are baboons from this region, from West Africa. They are pretty tough hombres, because they do a bit of hunting themselves. So they're tough hombres. Yeah. So, to take one of these down and actually consume it, pretty tough, And if you take a look, we'll just go. Some of these males, even one of the females, even one of the females has actually been picking off some of these.
Don't mess with Tumbo.
Exactly.
Tumbo's in charge here.
We're talking, I mean, obviously there's more. This is the other small type monkey, patters.
Yeah.
And now the larger animal. which are these. So bushbacks, and this is a bushback from this region as well. So,
and again, it's diving at those with the open mouth and taking it down with the teeth is the method that these chimps are using, isn't it, Harry?
Oh God! Oh yeah. That's you'd more than likely be impaled, by those horns if you did that. If you were stupid enough to do that.
I will not accept.
Only a vegan would do that.
Are carnivorous. They have no canines, Harry. Can't be carnivores. No canines.
No, you're wrong. You're wrong. They are crazy divers. They're just like they follow the same technique vegans do. Crazy stuff that people believe in. But this is a sort of. I mean, this is a fast animal.
Yeah.
This isn't a sort of an animal that is uniquely. So they're actually using techniques. They're using spears and they're using techniques to actually surround this animal to corner it. So
you mean they're actually using their brains? They're thinking about it and working together using tools.
Exactly.
Thus meaning the necessity for canine teeth no longer is.
Exactly.
Okay. Oh, now I understand. I'll ring Paul in Norwich and tell him.
Oh yeah, exactly. He needs to know. I mean,
go.
We need to inform Paul.
Yeah,
poor thing.
A lot of color there, but
yeah, we'll just go to the other. This is actually showing the sort of female hunting across different sites. As you can see, this is the sort of tool use. That's the overall. So the females are doing quite a bit of hunting in this sort of region compared to other regions where the Mahali sort of chimps, they actually do a bit more, but their environment isn't as dense forest compared to some of the other regions. So that may be a factor, but that's sheer speculation on my side. That's basically looking at the Fongoli type tool users and then extrapolating from less dense environment. Maybe that has some factor in the amount of availability of termites. Maybe. I'm not sure.
Again, termites, you don't so much need canines for termites.
That's true as well.
You just need a stick.
The context of
you need a straw.
female hunting across study sites. So Ian talked about that, the Carnivore high males and systematically. They use the word share. I'm referring to basically the last three categories. I think that they use the word theft. And
so the sort of difference between they also have a certain view that the reason for the women, their belief is, their hypothesis, that the social bonding and all these sort of relationships between is because there is less social theft. So because there's less social theft from the males in particular, what's actually happening in the females are incentivized to do more hunting. But then the problem is you've got quite the Mahali I showed you earlier have a lot of there's a lot of thievery that's actually happening here, but the women are actually the second in terms of chimp colonies, they're actually doing quite a lot of hunting in comparison to other colonies. So if that was there was a lack of incentive, I don't think stealing has anything to do with it. That will go down and the cooperative behaviour changes because of a savanna environment, but in these non-savanna environments have nothing to do with that. It has to do with what sort of animal product availability is, and that's pushing those pressures to get to the meat for the females as well. Because if they can use termites, they can get 70% protein and they can get about 23% fat. But if you don't have access to those sort of sources of nutrition, you're forced into hunting, even though there may be a very high steal rate. So it's a completely different reason, and I disagree with that hypothesis because their own data actually shows something different.
Gosh, that'd be a strange thing in a research subject, wouldn't it? to see a study that actually doesn't back up the conclusions made by those very authors. I've never heard of that happening before.
Exactly, precisely. It's because it's that uncomfortable thought that even the females, if required, if the necessity is there, they will hunt.
I would have figured, of course they do, yourself, but
yeah, I know, but we're talking about people that have got the cognitive dissonance and the tradition, the Jane Goddard period, and that sort of belief systems that chimps love to eat.
Don't you dare tell me that chimps don't eat fruit and trees, Harry. That'll upset me. Chimps eat fruit and trees. We know this. Come on. Goodness me.
Oops. And these are the sort of estimated kilos of meat captured. It was David, actually. David was the in terms. The others actually caught more, but in terms of weight, still the males are the top in terms of weight, the amount of quantity. So the females are still down to, I mean, one of the females, Tumbu, she's nearly at 15 kilos of meat captured, even doing better than some of the, this male here and this male here. Yeah. But this male, from memory, is actually a younger male, so it doesn't surprise me in that regard. But look at David. Look at the amount of baboon in the quantity here. Yeah. That's a tough.
Of course, that could be one baboon, couldn't it?
It potentially could be in terms of kilos. That's true. Yeah. But I don't think, I think David may have made the actual kill, in the final analysis, but there's also cooperation that's actually supporting. I mean, they will focus less on that cooperation, because we even see it in the ones that are the tree chimps. They will also cooperate. There may be one or two that will go in that are stronger, that will go in to grab and do most of the damage, but at the same time the others will cooperate and assist and support that activity. But so sometimes I find, just because somebody takes the lead in a pack, it doesn't mean that the pack's not involved, So I sometimes find this, it can be quite skewed the way it's actually presented. Something people need to keep in mind.
It also means that Tumbo's baboon is probably an infant.
Yeah, look,
but nonetheless.
Yeah, exactly. But it's still impressive, their ability to do this sort of level of hunting. Let me just go back to.
So she has probably whipped in and stolen a baby, I would say. That'd be my guess.
Yep.
But good on it. That's hunting.
Yeah, precisely. Now, these are some of the steps that they've actually observed. So these are quite complex steps in any primate, because normally
I'm lost already, Harry. I'm done.
Yeah. So they're actually looking at branch sizes. So they'll go out and investigate, look at the actual size, and then break it up and actually. And then also they will go through and they will trim off. So these are all the steps. They're actually looking at the numbers. So out of 17, the ones that actually were pretty good at the quality of the actual tool was about 4. In this group, in terms of trimming one or both ends. So sometimes they actually trim both ends, and they can actually use it interchangeably, so they don't, because if they actually try to attack one of these little animals and the tip busts, because they still haven't got to the stage where they're using tools in terms of like we did, stone tools and all sorts of things. At that stage, they may use stones for breaking nuts or doing things like that, but they're not really at that sort of sophistication yet. So trimming both ends gives them the ability to jab with one. If that sort of breaks, they can turn it around and jab with the other end. So some of them are actually, so 8 of them have actually achieved this sort of level of innovation, and half of them had good success in that regard. So these are sort of a trim tip of tool. This is another case of basically really, what they mean is fine tips, and pretty much 50% success as well in this sort of case. So, and basically they just go basically that eventually they discard and repeat all these steps again. Anyway, so let's just go to some of the other points that I want to cover. So that's one of the tools. That's one of the spears. You can see, they're trying to make something very pointy. And that's, 70 centimeters. Remember, they're still small in size. And, unless something's large in size, it's pretty hard to hold a large spear like a human can. So their spears are going to be smaller in comparison. But it's not the size, it's basically the innovation of creating tips to literally strike at an animal and impale it. That's the whole purpose of using this sort of tool use. So multiple steps.
28 inches, 70 centimeters, 28 inches. There you go. That's how long that stick is.
Yeah, exactly. So in comparison, so they're actually talking about tool dispatchment mammalian prey involves the kind of foresight and intellectual complexity that most likely typified early human relatives. Example, Australopithecus. Pithecines, or Pithecus, as the other way.
Australopithecines is good.
Yes. So the oldest known weapons of organic material, and this is amongst humans and hominins and stuff like that, is 400,000 years old wooden spears. And there's approximately 2 million years younger than the earliest evidence for stone tool usage by hominins. So these guys are basically into sticks much, at what we would consider outside their evolutionary sort of envelope. But as I've always said, the common ancestor for us and the chimp would have been a meat eater, as I said last time. And it doesn't surprise me that in the sort of environment that we would have found ourselves, the pressure would have been on to push towards bipedalism, to push towards tool usage for hunting, and to move away from their traditions because you don't have trees that you can use gravity anymore. Now, obviously, we're seeing these behaviours. We're seeing behaviours like using waterholes, using caves. These are behaviours that we can go back in the archaeological evidence and see amongst hominins and humans, from Homo erectus, Neanderthal, and Homo sapiens. But we've never seen this behaviour amongst any of the other primates. So this is a unique behaviour, and it's really important that people really understand that sort of thing. I'm not going to read the whole lot. It basically, this sort of area is characterised by woodlands, grasslands, and small patches of gallery forests. So there is a bit of forest there, and sometimes they do venture in there, but it's sort of near here or there. Now, in terms of their duration of their hunting, it can vary. As you can see, the time for the males is a lot of the actual, especially the infant male, and a few of the juveniles is because of lack of experience, where the women actually do quite well, even against the actual adult males, in terms of success and duration of actually using, hunting behavior with tools. So what they've observed is that the women have, because they developed the spear technology, they are actually better hunters. And the kids that are around them, around the females, tend to learn better than the juvenile young ones around the males. So that's the sort of difference. The other thing, let me try and bring it up. Interview. I'm trying to remember where exactly at what point it was.
Make this long stick tool branch, and they hunt bush babies. So that's also different.
That's a different tools that they've actually collected.
Yeah. But so they hunt bush babies in these cavities. But it's in fact the females that do this type of hunting more than the males. Yeah. So in some aspects, the males, they're typical, and the males chase down monkeys, but females hunt with tools more. And really, it's the younger subadult females that are driving this behavior. And so we're getting together a paper now on meat sharing. And to get to that point, we look just at successful hunters. And in fact, out of the top 11 hunters, you had about 6 females. And so that's just odd for chimps, really. I hate to say odd, but it's typical for Fongoli, but it's just not the norm with chimpanzees where most males hunt. And then the other thing that we're focusing on now is sharing or food transfer. Mm-hmm. And one of the reasons I think that females are seen to hunt less at other sites is that the prey is usually taken from them when they get the prey. And that's that argument that they were saying earlier about, but there's a bit of contradiction there with that high level of thievery in the one that I actually pointed out. Can't pronounce it. And that area compared, so I have a bit of a disagreement on that part of the hypothesis.
Human evolution involved the importance of food sharing. And also we think about things like empathy. And, from your field site, there are such tremendous examples of the way that chimpanzees are I would say empathetic toward each other. Mm-hmm.
There's definitely interesting examples of empathy. And one that's sort of, I don't know if I'd say off the wall, but it was a different type of example. It was actually, sadly, an infant had been taken by poachers at our site. And miraculously, I'd even say we were able to confiscate her and then put her back in the group within 5 days. Yeah. And when that happened, the mother accepted her, but the first individual that came and actually retrieved her from where we put her down on the ground was an adolescent male. He retrieved the baby. He carried her to the mother. The mother had been injured, and so she couldn't keep up with the group for several days. So she would stop, put the baby down, and that adolescent male actually helped her carry that infant for those days. And as far as we know, he's not maternally related. He's probably not the father. He was too young. So it's interesting. And ultimately, whatever the explanation is, he showed what we would call empathy if it were human. So that to me was just a pretty obvious example. But even so, when you look at their individual relationships, there's different types of behaviors that you might expect if it's a typical chimp. Yeah. And I think, we've come to realize that chimps are different, but we still have that. I think as humans, we like to dichotomize and we like to categorize, and we still see chimps as behaving, in one certain way, but we definitely see some differences. And it may relate to something like mating strategy. It could be that, but at least, and on one level, it does seem to be a different type of behavior, and definitely empathy plays into it, I'd say.
Okay.
I sort of disagree with everybody is always going around the mating sort of strategies. I can understand amongst bonobos that actually use sex, as I've actually pointed out in the past, as a way of socializing, and males use their prowess of hunting as part of the chimps that are above that river in Central Africa, that basically use the sharing amongst the actual the group that actually did the hunt, and giving a bit here and there to women for favors.
Yeah.
But these guys are basically cooperating, empathizing with each other, supporting each other, not stealing from each other. All the behaviors are the sort of behaviors we would recognize in ourselves.
I would like to, perhaps.
Yeah, but you know what I'm trying to say is sort of behaviors, we frown on stealing, even though some of us do it. We frown on a lot of these sort of things, where typical chimps don't. What I'm saying is the environment and these environmental pressures epigenetically are basically changing, potentially, because they haven't done any research, but this behavior would silence certain genes and upregulate other genes.
Of course.
And so there is quite clear change in the characteristics which are completely closer to what we would consider acceptable behavior. They're not entirely at our level, but compared to traditional chimps, there is substantial difference, and it's quite noticeable. And they have noted it, which is good. So we'll just go down. So some of the procedures.
Don't forget though that chimps live in trees and they eat fruit.
Oh yeah, you're right. Yeah. Yes, this is not true. This exists in a parallel universe.
Of course, yes,
exactly. It's
crazy mixed up world.
Well, don't want to upset the vegans.
Yes,
you can. Yes. You could see if they see this, there'll be tears in their eyes. I truly feel for them. And this is the sort of conditions of the environment. They're actually the initial study recognised a 63 square kilometre type environment.
Yeah.
Recently, it's been reconfigured to be much
110.
Yeah, 110. Yeah, 110 exactly.
Yeah.
So these are the tool lengths. So they average around about 63 centimetres, but they do get as large as 1.2 meters. So, which is, quite a large thing for a chimp that's actually, that's slightly taller than the chimp itself.
Okay.
When it's
180 centimeters is basically 6 feet, isn't it?
Yeah. So it's pretty much a much larger weapon. So you would have to have some level of dexterity or training to basically utilize something like that effectively. Well, if you look at the chimps in other parts, they will cut small little twigs or pieces of branches or whatever to use for whatever purpose. These guys are basically, cutting large pieces, removing all the actual leaves, and then creating tips at either end or one end. So, that requires some thought, some thoughtfulness, and some level of sophistication and changing behaviour in that regard. I'm just looking at the time, and I realise that we're sort of moving quite a bit. So
jolly old time keeps doing that, doesn't it?
Yep, I know. During the time, adult males accounted for 36% of the party composition, and females, immature chimpanzees, accounted for 64% of the party composition.
Right.
When we use these proportions to calculate as expected value of hunting rates, the low proportion of hunting with tools by males at Fongoli compared with the proportion of observation of females and immature chimpanzees using tools to hunt in significantly less than expected. Females in immature hunting was significantly greater than expected on the basis of the representation of the party. So in terms of party numbers, females were doing quite a bit of hunting compared to the sort of, and I wanted to point this out because people may say, well, it's not that significant. They will play it down, but these people observed that the level in comparison was quite high. Any questions, mate?
No, you've covered it brilliantly, Harry. As usual, the level that you go to is very good. Thank you. Very, very clear. So we can now stop saying things like chimpanzees sit in trees and eat fruit. We can stop saying that chimpanzees can't possibly be carnivores because they don't have canines. We can just stop all this ridiculous nonsense now. It's been sorted out. Thank you, Harry. You've done a great job. Thank you all for tuning in. Join us next time for something similar but different. See you then.
See you, mate.